The book of Job is a self-contained fable, a very important fable. The recent Coen brothers film, latest film, is a version of the book of Job, and there are many, many literary allusions to it in later literature.
The book of Job is a kind of fantastic folk tale. It's not clear that you have to believe that any of these events happen.
First of all, the book of Job is set up like a Shakespearean play. It's set up, really like a stage play. You have like acts and scenes. It's almost like a movie. The first scene you have is that Job is introduced. In Hebrew, he's called Hiob. And he lives in the land of Uz, not Oz. And Hiob is presented as a righteous, a pious man, and he is extremely rich. He has 3 daughters, 7 sons. He has more cattle than all of New Zealand. So he is this really rich, good guy.
We don't honestly know whether he's a real character or a fictitious character, but that's unimportant.
After he's introduced, the camera pans into heaven and you see God sitting in heaven.
Where Satan comes to God and says, you know, Job's such a righteous fellow, but that's understandable because you prospered him so much. If you were to take away his prosperity, he'd curse you to your face.
So he challenges God, and God accepts the challenge and then gives permission to Satan to basically take all that stuff away.
Job suffers a series of great misfortunes. First, all his flocks and his servants and his sons and daughters get killed.
So he loses all his stuff within like 3 sentences.
The ordeals come in 2 groups. The first is the loss of his flocks and his children. The second is the loss of his health, and he's covered from head to toe with sores. It
actually says in Job 7 that he had worms in his skin, right? So that maggots maybe, or worms, or skin worms were eating at the boils. And it says he was sitting in the dust, in the ashes, and he was scratching himself with a potsherd, right? Because I guess his boils were just itching.
At this point, his wife says, "Curse God and die." But Job refuses to renounce his integrity, his piety.
Job patiently refused to curse God, so that's why we sometimes hear of the patience of Job.
Well, Job's patience is proverbial, but actually in the book, Job himself is not at all patient. He's patient for the initial trials, but once he's scraping the sores from his body and his friends come to comfort him, then he gets very angry indeed. That's what's magnificent about Job, his anger. Well, Job's response to his fortune is rather grand in a way.
Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
That's the origin of the saying, the Lord gives, the Lord taketh away.
Now you have the more Shakespearean part who starts. You have a whole set of speeches being delivered, either by Job or his friends. And it basically goes like this. Job basically tells him, look, I'm innocent, nothing has happened. I have no idea why this evil has befallen me. His friends, the theologians they are, basically say, no, you must have done something wrong, because obviously you have bad karma, and all this bad stuff basically happens because in some way you must have sinned. Something bad must have been done by you so that all this stuff happens.
One thing that's most important, and many commentators miss, is that when Job spends all these dialogues complaining, apart from his initial speech when he curses the day he was born, he doesn't actually spend a lot of time complaining about his misfortunes. What he complains about is his friends. His friends come along to comfort him, tell him he must have sinned and should make his peace with God. So Job refuses to do that, and his greatest ordeal is that he's lost his face, his honor, his integrity before his friends. No one will comfort him.
But at some point, Job starts to complain against God and basically demand or question for God to appear, to basically tell him what's wrong, what's going on. And that is, I find that always very meaningful, because that is what people do when they suffer. They question, where is God? What's going on? Can he just show up? Can he not explain? And at the end of the book, he actually does. So God, at the end of the book, shows up in a storm. Right? There's a storm, and then God, in a sense, starts speaking to Job.
God speaks to him out of the whirlwind. And instead of answering all Job's questions, God puts Job to the test. He says, you know, why do you ask me questions? Who are you to ask questions?
Can you count the stars? Do you know how to do this? Can you be a judge? You know, do you know how to do righteous judgments? So he's basically asking Job, well, you're complaining, but can you actually do the job that I'm doing? Are you actually capable? Well, in a sense, it ends up like Bruce Almighty. You know, in the movie Bruce Almighty, you have Morgan Freeman, who plays God, and then you have Jim Carrey, who plays Bruce, right? And in the end, you know, after Bruce has gotten all his divine skills and can change all these things and had a lot of fun with it, he then realizes at some point this is actually really difficult to manage the world and manage the universe. And that's basically Morgan Freeman then, as God, says, well, it's not that easy, is it? And that's sort of how the book of Job ends, in which God shows up and just tells him, look, this is what it means to be God, and in fact, you're not, I'm God.
At the end of the story, God intervenes, says that Job has spoken of him what is right, whereas the friends haven't, and they have to make sacrifices for forgiveness. So the idea here is that Job seems to have lost his integrity, but when people suffer, if you then condemn them, that is the harshest trial. And when God comes in to vindicate Job, then all the people that Job has helped in his life gather round and give him some money or a gold ring or something like that. And he ends up twice as wealthy as ever before.
Some people are a little bit cynical about that and say, well, after you've lost everything, it's a bit too late to restore everything. But others say, well, it's to show in the story that God in the end was simply testing him. And as I've said, the answer to the test is that Job showed remarkable patience through it all, the patience of Job.
It's a very happy ending, and there's something very distinctive about the ending. Job gets back as many children as he's had before, 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he also gives his daughters an inheritance alongside the sons, as though that's something remarkably distinctive for that time. Perhaps because he was so amazingly wealthy that his sons wouldn't lose anything by giving the daughters an inheritance.